Shalom, Israel. First and foremost, I want to give all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rachachadash. Double honors to the apostles of Great Millstone for teaching this truth. And peace and salutation to all the Yakim out there kicking this word in truth and sincerity. Now I'm going to do a multi-part video on wild edible greens, edible weeds, stuff that you can find growing probably in your backyard, empty lots. And this is knowledge I've been blessed with that I want to share for when we enter Jacob's troubles, when conventional food is scarce or too expensive. You actually find quite a bit of food growing around you. For most of us, a lot of us living in those greener climates. Even if you're out in the desert like I am, in the right season you can find quite a bit of wild food. So I'm gonna do this multi-part video. I'm not sure how many parts it's gonna take. I have a lot of plants to cover. Might be continuous as I find more and more plants. But I'm starting off with a lot of plants that I know, a lot of them that I don't know, but I've done the research on. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into some scriptures first. I'm going to Genesis 1:30, and it says, "And to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth on the earth, wherein there is life, I have given every green herb for meat, and it was so." I'm going to look into that word, meat. And that's okla. Okla, and it's translated as food. Food, eating. So, right there in the scriptures, it's saying that there's already food here for us before we even go and start sowing seeds. And this mass agriculture thing where we end up buying food from grocery stores. Most of us don't grow any of our own food, but there's already food on the earth for us to eat as meat, and it's satisfying. We'll get into that. I'm going to go to Psalms 104 and 14. Psalms 104 and 14, and it reads, "He causeth the grass to grow for the cattle, and herb for the service of man, that he may bring forth food out of the earth." So there's food out there, growing out of the earth. It's just already been set up for us. So, like I said, even in the desert climate, it's a little bit harder to find it, but there's lots of food for us out there to eat. And then we go into second Ezra's. Actually, there's just a couple more, and then I'll get into the lesson here. Second Ezra's 12 and 51. This is Ezra after the angel had commanded him to eat only flowers. It was kind of it wasn't a fast. The angel said it wasn't a fast, but he sustained himself on these flowers in the field. "But I remained in the field 7 days, as the angel commanded me, and did eat only in those days of the flowers of the field, and had my meat of the herbs." He had his eating, his food, just off the herbs itself. Then we go to 2 Ezra 9 and 6. Slachia 9 and 26. And it reads, "So I went my way into the field, which is called Ardath, like as he commanded me, and there I sat among the flowers, and did eat of the herbs of the field, and the meat of the same satisfied me." So right there, Ezra is saying that he was satisfied with all these herbs in the field, because there's a lot of food out there, a lot of nutrition in these herbs. So during Jacob's trouble, for you, your family, it'd be helpful to know what around you is what you can eat. I mean, if you're walking down the street, Jacob's Trouble, you're hungry, you're out of food, you'd probably be walking past food everywhere, like next to you all the time. There's in these green places, wherever if you live in a place where it's green most of the time, back east, guarantee you you're always within walking distance of food. It's always around. It's just a matter of identifying it. I lived in Phoenix for a while, and even in downtown Phoenix. This was after the rainy season. Downtown Phoenix in the city, in a lot, there was I identified a couple of plants that were good for eating. Some malva, and then something else, another plant that I wasn't familiar with, but I'll get into later how you can identify plants that you don't even know. Identify plants for eating that you're not familiar with, just through the spirit and through the quality of the leaves in the plant, and we'll get into that though. So it's helpful to know that these plants, a lot of these edible herbs, they're growing to heal the earth and to recarbonate the earth. So you'll find a lot of these plants in fields that have been disturbed, empty lots, because what they're attempting to do, these plants, is to, like I said, add that carbon back to the earth, and then they break up soil that's been packed down. Their roots actually go down and break that soil up so more plants can grow there. They're essentially continually healing the earth. So empty lots, abandoned farm fields, places like that, places where humans have gone and disturbed the earth, is oftentimes really good places to find a large abundance of these edible plants. And even in the forest you'll find a lot too, but usually when you find these empty lots and fields, you'll find tons of just one plant growing that's trying to reclaim the earth. And this is even, you'll see this when we're in the kingdom, when we're doing the year of rest in the fields, for the fields, that they're not just barren fields, it's just not dirt sitting there. What will happen is weeds or herbs will be growing there to add carbon back to that soil, and that's the healing process of the earth. It's just allowing it to grow and do its own thing, so it can heal itself. So some cautions on where you're looking for herbs. A lot of these herbs are considered noxious weeds, so they get sprayed a lot. They'll get sprayed with, what is that stuff called? Of course it's plant killer, but there's a name for, it's not coming to my head right now. That plant killer stuff that they spray on it and just drops it dead. So a lot of the spraying happens in public areas like parks, recreation areas, public property, campgrounds, and especially I've noticed more in dry climates. They try to keep the weeds down, because in the drier climates they use a lot of rock for landscaping, and then these weeds will grow in those rocks, so they'll spray those weeds down. So you want to be careful where you pick them. Avoid, unless you know they're not spraying in these areas, avoid these public areas, like I said, parks, recreation areas, campgrounds. You just want to go for more abandoned places that aren't being continually manicured. Another place you don't want to pick herbs from is where the water's polluted. And that's like next to factories, and especially next to livestock cattle ranches, where they have the water runoff, because in a lot of cases this water has a lot of parasites that come from the livestock in it. So you want to avoid those places. So there's a couple of tools. I'll be using a tool throughout this video, a website that you can search for plants on. It has pictures and descriptions. And then there's another tool, actually, I'll put this in the description. Very useful tool for using now while we still have internet and are able to gain this knowledge. If you're interested in going out and looking for plants and learning how to identify them, this is on the social media site Reddit, and it's called What Is This Plant? And basically what you can do is you go out into the field, you take pictures of plants that you may think, after I go through this video, you'll be interested in going out and looking for plants, but then you're not quite sure even after watching this video. So you can take a picture of the plant, go to this site, post that picture and ask, what is this plant? And usually you'll get a response pretty quickly within the same day about what that plant is. There's a lot of knowledgeable people on this in this subreddit to help with this kind of stuff. So those are the tools, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump into sharing some plants. Okay, here's one of the tools that I use. I'll be using throughout this video and throughout all the videos in this series. It's wildediblefood.com, and I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. The first herb, a lot of you may be familiar with, and that's dandelion. So what I'm going to do is read the description, not the description, but the habitat, and then edible parts, just to try to keep this short. And then I'm going to jump over to some photos I have saved, so you could to help you identify it, and a lot of you might be familiar with it, but there's still some issues with identifying dandelion because some of the leaves are, I'll show you in the leaves. You'll see when we get to the pictures. So dandelions are the most common broadleaf weed in most lawns. It is found virtually everywhere. Salahia. It is found in virtually every kind of habitat, from openings in deep woods to cultivated fields, from rocky hillsides to fertile gardens and lawns. And that's kind of why I chose dandelion first, because it's everywhere. I mean, from the desert to the mountains, you find this thing everywhere. Now, of course, in the desert, they're pretty puny compared to the ones you'll find in the greener climates, but nevertheless, there's still dandelion out there. So edible parts: leaves, root, and flower. Dandelion leaves can be added to a salad or cooked. They can also be dried and stored for the winter, or blanched and frozen. Flowers can be made into juice or added into many recipes. The root can be made into a coffee substitute. The root and leaves can be dried, stored, and made into tea. Now that root, especially when you roast it, is very good for detoxing as well. So consider that. Okay, we'll jump over to, let's go check out the photos. Okay, dandelion. All right, there's your typical dandelion. This is I believe it's a drawing photo. No, it looks like a photo. So pay attention to the leaves. This is for pretty much all the plants. It's the shape of the plant, where it's growing, how it's growing, the leaf shape. And this is how you identify plants. You take all these little details into consideration. And here's the different leaves. So this is why it can be sometimes hard to identify dandelion, because we have these round-like leaves, and there's names for these leaves. I thought I was going to get into a detailed video adding like the name of the leaves and leaf types, and I realized that was just going to get too complicated. So we'll just do visual. So you got this rounded leaf here on the left, and then on the right you got that more serrated leaf, and then in that last one I showed you, look how serrated those leaves are. I mean, they're radically different from that rounded leaf. So it can be hard to identify that plant, especially if there's no flowers on it. If the flowers on it, then it's really easy to identify it. There's some different leaves of dandelion. They can just be so radically different. Here we have dandelion out in the field. Notice those leaves. Even on this plant, the leaves are different. We have that serrated style leaf, and then we have a more, on the bottom there, more rounded style leaf, and then you can see down here, very rounded, in that leaf there, very rounded compared to the serrated leaf there just below it. So that's just something to pay attention to. There's not that many plants that are like that. I know I found a couple on my list, at least one more on my list, where you have these huge variations in what the leaves looks like. Last picture of dandelion there. Okay. So back to the website here. We're going to go to the next plant. And, Slovakia, let me go. I'll go here. I'll go by what folders we have. Let's go to Amaranth next. Amaranth is oftentimes called either Palmer's amaranth or also pigweed. So we'll go to the Palmer's. And they're different, but essentially they're the same plant as far as parts you pick to eat off of. Okay, so the habitat. This is a drier climate plant. Palmer amaranth is commonly found in farmers' fields. This plant prefers arable land, deserts, sparsely vegetated areas, road and rail networks, and associated land. Other artificial surfaces, like wastelands, typically it is found in the southwest U.S., but it is also found in many countries worldwide. Palmer amaranth is documented in 28 states, including South Dakota, Iowa, and Wisconsin. It has even been documented in Loyan and Yellow Medicine counties in Minnesota. So the edible parts of amaranth are the leaves, which can be used fresh or cooked, and they could also be dried for later use, stews and soups, or frozen. There's very, very small seeds on these things. This is the stuff when you go to buy amaranth in the store, bulk section, if you have stores like this, where they have the bulk section, seeds and nuts. Sometimes you'll find amaranth there. They're very, very tiny seeds. You can eat them when the plant is later in the season. The seeds will just fall right out of the little flowers. I'll show you where the seeds are on the plant once we get to the pictures. But you can ground the seeds up and use them for baking, make flour out of them. What does it say? Your whole seeds are gelatinous and difficult to crush in the mouth. They should be ground before use. Okay, let's jump over to the pictures here. Alright, now this plant grows to, it can get pretty tall actually. I mean, I've seen some tall ones myself, but in pictures, 10 feet tall, but typically, they're 4 to 6 feet. It really depends on the climate where they're at. Again, notice the leaves. Notice the stalk. I think I have a better picture of the stalk on it. And these flower tops. They're not actually flowers, but they kind of look like flowers. All right. There's another shot there. Notice these buds on top, which I called flowers in that last video, or sorry, the last image. Notice the leaves. And I try to do my best to get a picture of how it grows. Amaranth, sometimes it'll grow in bunches, but oftentimes you'll find it just growing by itself, like this one large plant, and then maybe a few feet away you'll find another one. Again, notice the leaves, the stalks. The stalks are sometimes red. And then these buds on top. Here's a really good shot of that bud. So the identifying factor for a lot of these plants, and like I said, of course, is habitat, the leaves, the flowers is a big one. It really helps to know the flowers on them, but oftentimes, especially when they're younger, they don't have flowers on them, so you'll have to figure out other identifying factors. The shape of the plant, how it grows, the height of the plant. There's all these different factors to know when you're identifying plants. Once you start getting the hang of it, you actually pick it up pretty easy. All right, let's go to bittercress here. I'll come back to those pictures. Bittercress. And check out some of these photos here that they have on the site. I might even have some of these in my folder. Notice the leaf, how it grows on the stalks. Notice the flowers, how the flowers grow on these long stalks above the plant. Hairy bittercress occurs on bare soil, in woodlands, and sometimes in light grassy areas. It likes dry slopes, juniper meadows, forest margins, wasteland, crags, rocky outcrops, sometimes as a garden's weed. This plant grows on all continents with the exception of Antarctica, which if you're in Antarctica, how the heck should you get there? Anyhow, this plant is great for salads, salsa, pesto, and anywhere you would use raw cress. It loses most of its almost arugula-like flavor when cooked. Flowers and leaves are edible. Flowers can be tough to chew. Leaves are tender and have a lot of vitamin C, calcium, magnesium, beta-carotene, as well as antioxidants. Now, I've never encountered this plant in the wild. There's actually quite a few of these I haven't, but nevertheless, I can still go through how to identify them. So, we notice how it's growing by itself. It's like in a clump, low to the ground, and then notice the architecture of the leaf there, in that shape, where it has the leaves parallel to each other on that stalk, and then that one leaf at the very end. This is a major identifying factor. That picture doesn't belong here. Here we go. Now this one, I don't think that belongs here either. There, that's what we're looking for. Again, that leaf pattern, the parallel leaves with that one leaf on the end. This one doesn't have flowers on it, but it's grown out of that one central clump. There's not many leaves in the center. The larger leaves are on the outside, leaving the center kind of not necessarily barren, but there's just less vegetation there in the center, and that's where the flowers will come out of. Also notice the shape of that leaf on the end there. That's going to be another identifying factor. You can see that there. I don't even know what to compare that to, but and that one there. Here, that's a good one. Almost like a spade, a club, Slovakia. More like a club. It's got those three humps on it. And then this leaf's a little bit different, and you'll encounter that a lot in a lot of plants where, it still has that same general architecture where the leaves are parallel to each other, and then it has that one leaf on the end, but then these have kind of these points on them. If you notice that, we go on really close. Oh, Slovakia. You have these little points on and we didn't see that on the other one. Basically, a lot of these plants, they come in different varieties, but they're the same plant. Here we have some, oh, let's go back here. It's not the best picture, but we have a bunch grown against the wall. This is when it's going to flower, and then eventually it's going into a seed. So it gets taller, a little bushier, further away from the ground. Here's another pretty good picture. Okay. Oh, let's go back here. Next, we're gonna go to burdock, and then I'm just gonna finish this video off. I didn't want it to be too long, and do no more plants in the next video. I'll go to the description here. Check out some of these pictures. Notice those leaves. There's going to be a major identifying factor. Those buds there, which eventually turn into flowers and grow pretty tall. Look at the curliness of those leaves. Habitat. Burdock thrives along riverbanks, undisturbed habitats, roadsides, vacant lots, and fields. It grows throughout North America, but not in southern regions. Edible parts. First year roots and second year stems can be cooked boiling for 20 minutes. Then seasoned to taste. Before cooking, however, the stems should be peeled and the roots scrubbed in order to remove the bitter rind. Immature flower stalks may also be harvested in late spring before flowers appear. Their taste resembles that of artichoke. The Japanese have been known to eat the leaves when the plant is young and leaves are soft. Alright, we'll go check out the pictures. Again, major identifying factors is those leaves. At the bottom of the plant, they're going to get pretty large, actually. Those really big leaves down there. And of course smaller as they go up. If it's an older plant, it'll have these buds on them, which are all prickly, and they have those like magenta colored flowers. This is a younger plant without the stalks, the taller stalks with the flowers on them. The leaves still pretty much look the same. It's going to be harder to identify the younger plants that do this, where they stay low to the ground until they grow their flowers. But again, it's going to be in the leaves. They're large, pretty broad, slightly curly. There's a little drawing. Another one without the stalk. This is a pretty good one. It gives you an idea of its habitat. Grows by itself, typically. You're not going to find a bunch of these bunched together. You may find a bunch together, but when you're out looking for these plants, this is the best way to find them. The ones that grow by themselves like this is it's just a lot easier to identify them when they're not crowded by a bunch of other plants. Notice the skirt of those large leaves on the bottom. General shape of the plant. There's some of those buds up close. And another flowerless one, just so you have a really good idea how to identify this plant without flowers on it. Alright, we'll stop there for now, and I'll post up another video very soon. Till then, shalom.